A short question. Is it time for the U.S. to abandon Saudi Arabia?
No. Look, if your view of foreign policy is we should only be friends with countries like Iceland and Belgium or nice countries, then that's a way of thinking about foreign policy. But foreign policy is not conducted as a kind of moral vanity. And Saudi Arabia, we all know in this room, is a regime that is detestable in all kinds of ways, from its treatment of women to religious minorities and so on. But what happens if we do abandon Saudi Arabia? Do the Saudis go, oh, we're abandoned, we'll change? No, they don't. First of all, they're going to find new allies, and those allies will be worse than, and exert less of a restraining impulse than we do. Secondly, they're going to have to find new defense arrangements, and one of those defense arrangements may well be a nuclear capability to counter what they fear is an incipient Iranian nuclear capability. Do you really want nuclear proliferation in the most dangerous region of the world? Thirdly, let's say we do abandon them, and we're not there to provide some kind of reassurance and guidance, and there's a crisis in Saudi Arabia. There's going to be a crisis if the price of oil remains as low as it is for an extended period of time. You have roughly 9,000 princes, all of whom feels entitled to one thing or another. Saudi Arabia is 15% Shiite. It's religiously potentially fractious. What if there's a civil war in Saudi Arabia? What if ISIS sees an opportunity to, it's expanded into Iraq, Syria, Libya. Why not Saudi Arabia? That's the big prize. That's where Mecca and Medina are. So the notion that we should abandon Saudi Arabia, I think, is dangerous. And it comes from a certain moralizing streak in American foreign policy that is never good, whether it comes from the left or the right. There's a difference between having a moral foreign policy and having a moralizing one. A moral foreign policy accepts that part of morality often involves a choice of evils. A moralizing one is, I'm on the side of angels, and if you're not, to hell with you. And we've run into trouble when we had a moralizing foreign policy, whether it was the Jimmy Carter moralizing, which abandoned the Shah, or the moralizing which led us to try to install Jeffersonian democracy in Iraq.
Yeah. I would just add to that, your arguments, that I think it's a particularly delicate moment in time, not only because of the economic and strategic reasons you cited, but also because there's a generational change of leadership that's just that is starting in Saudi Arabia. And I think you have elements of that next generation that, while still traditional Saudis, understand they want a closer relationship with the United States and the West, and they also understand that they do have to liberalize their society and figure out how to come into the 21st century more fully. And so I think it's a moment in time where I think the country is at a particularly potentially fragile and also decisive point.
I think it's also worth remembering that wonderful Lyndon Johnson aphorism characteristic: it's better to have people inside the tent pissing out than outside the tent pissing in. As the refugee crisis in Europe and Turkey has grown and Europe's economy has wavered, populist parties have made significant gains throughout the region. What does that mean for global security? Is the EU doomed?